All right, awesome. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming out, all of the students and also all of the faculty. Thank you so much. We value this every single year. Students really love, the interaction with professors, and honestly, this exchange of ideas is so helpful and it's so beneficial. So to kind of give a rundown on how this is going to work, students, you will be unmuted in order to ask questions only. Otherwise, we'll have to remain muted for security purposes. Faculty, if you want to answer questions or give input at any point, you should be able to unmute as well. I believe we're in the process of figuring this out. And so if you're not able to unmute, why don't you go ahead and message Jack Gardner, and he will be able to help kind of get that together. All right, next slide. All right, so we're going to start off with a land acknowledgement. So ACM and UPE at UCLA acknowledge our presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino Tongva peoples. All right, next slide. All right, so this is our agenda. We're going to do introductions first. Then we're going to hit several key categories. The first one being diversity and inclusion. The second one being academic curriculum. And the third one being academic honesty. Next slide. All right, so just some introductions. So hello, everyone. I'm Rucha. I'm a fourth-year computer science student, and I am currently the president of ACM at UCLA.
Hi, I'm Chloe. I'm a fourth-year computer science student as well, and I am the president of Epsilon Pi Epsilon at UCLA.
Great, and I also just want to give a huge thank you to William, Catherine, Kevin, Rashawn, Jessica, and Kendrick for helping us get this event in order. All right, so we have a ton of different professors that are here today. Again, thank you so much. We want to start off with just an introduction. So with the order that's on screen, if you could just say hi, introduce yourself, talk about what classes you teach, and then maybe mention your favorite spot on campus and your favorite quarantine activity, that would be great. Let me see if we have, okay, perfect. So I see professors should be able to unmute themselves now. Is Professor, okay. I'm getting some messages that you can't unmute. Why don't we go start from the beginning if Professor Chang is here? Otherwise, if not, we can go on to, okay, let me see who's here. Looks like some people are still filing in. Let's start with Professor Eggert.
Oh, hi, I'm Paul Eggert. Let's see, I teach, well, this quarter I'm teaching Computer Science 97, soon to be 35L, and Computer Science 131. Favorite spot on campus is Kirchhoff, the coffee house, of course, because I'm always drinking coffee. And what was the last one? I'm supposed to say, I've forgotten the last topic.
Favorite quarantine activity.
Favorite quarantine activity is walking.
Awesome. All right, let's go to Professor Kong. If you're able to unmute. Oh, okay, not yet. All right, let's go on to Professor Kim.
Hi, my name is Miriam Kim. I teach CS 130 software engineering. My favorite spot on campus is like many places on the hill. I think some of you may know I'm a faculty resident, so I live in the Net Plaza. I think the Net Plaza, the quad might be my favorite spot as well. Favorite quarantine activity, I became better baker. And also I love bicycling. Around the campus, near the Expo Trail, and also going to along the bike paths in West LA. So
awesome. Let's go on to Professor Korf.
I can unmute myself. I'm Rich Korf. I'm a faculty member in AI. I'm also the undergraduate vice chair. My favorite spot on campus is probably the top of Jan's steps. I think it's beautiful up there. My favorite quarantine activity is probably getting groceries delivered from Costco.
All right, Professor Milstein.
Hi, Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Todd Milstein. I teach CS30. Favorite spot on campus, definitely the botanical gardens. It's nice and secluded and beautiful down there. Favorite quarantine activity? Well, I have been playing a lot more of my guitar now that I'm stuck in my garage all day. So that's been nice.
Awesome. Professor Naschenberg?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Kerry Natchenberg, for those that don't know me. My classes I teach are CS32, although I did teach CS31 once or twice, about 15 years ago. My favorite spot on campus is on the roof of Math Sciences. There's a platform where you can sit and just sort of lay down and look at the stars. And my favorite quarantine activity is rock climbing outdoors, because you can get away from people and it's very healthy.
All right, Professor Nowatzki?
He wasn't sure if he could be here on time. He's probably going to join us later.
Gotcha. Okay, we can circle back. Professor Peng?
Hey, I just joined, so I'm not sure whether this is like introduction or something.
Yes.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I just joined UCLA 2020. I'm working on natural language processing. It's a sub area of artificial intelligence where we're looking to how to teach the machine read a bunch of natural language texts and understand the most important information, as well as being able to generate natural language texts so that we can smoothly interact with human. The computers can smoothly interact with human.
Awesome. Cool. Let's go on to Professor Smallberg.
Okay, nobody knows me. I'm David Smallberg. I teach CS 31 and 32. Favorite spot on campus? Currently, yeah, the botanical gardens, although what I think is the really coolest is unfortunately inaccessible because security got tightened quite some time ago, which is under the bridge in the steam tunnels below, between the near the flagpole. You can see the original canyon that's been filled in, and the roadway over there was actually a bridge, and it's all hollowed out and it's dirt, and it's just like the canyon's still there. It's just underground. You can't see it anymore, but they've locked up the steam tunnels pretty tightly.
All right.
Although someone in the chat says that maybe not.
All right, looks like Professor Khan, you can unmute yourself now.
Hi, yeah, I finally am able to. So I'm teaching undergraduate course CS 133. In fact, we just finished a few minutes ago. So the students, this is on parallel distributed computing. Students do designs, labs in AWS and the cloud computing platforms for CPUs, GPUs, FPGAs, where you can create your own processors. That's also very much the area I do my research. My favorite spot is, I would have to say, is the sculpture garden. I taught a class there a few years back, and it's just so enjoyable to walk around. And in fact, especially at night when all the lights are turning on, it's quite magical. During the quarantine period, I started trying yoga, so that's something new. And so far, I'm enjoying that.
Awesome. Looks like Professor Sun has just joined us. You want to introduce yourself?
Hello. So yeah, I'm Joe's son, and because I missed the first part, so I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. Just to introduce myself and.
Yeah, classes you teach, favorite spot on campus, and favorite quarantine activity.
Oh, okay. So I'm teaching CS 145, Introduction to Data Mining. Favorite sports. Okay, I don't do too much sports because I do walking, and right now I try to teach and have my meetings standing. Okay, if possible. What's my favorite quarantine activity? Yeah, I spend lots of time with my kids, so I guess that's my activity. Okay, so I think that's it.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay,
and Perfect. So let's circle back to Professor Nowatzki. I think you.
Yeah, can you
are
hear
able
me
to
now?
unmute Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm Tony Nowatzki. I teach CS 33. Favorite spot on campus. My favorite spots have been taken. The botanical gardens, the sculpture garden, I like a lot. And I don't know if it's my favorite quarantine activity, but I've been forced to learn cooking. So we're being extra careful and cooking every meal. So I now have to cook.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much to all our professors for introducing themselves. If there's anyone else from the department and engineering school present and would like to introduce yourselves, also feel free. Maybe Dean Santos, if you're able to.
Of course, yes. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate. My name is Veronica Santos. As of January, I became the Associate Dean of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion and Faculty Affairs for our school. I'm also a professor of mechanical and aerospace engineering. So for those of you CS students that like to dabble in MAE classes, I teach MAE 102, which is dynamics of particles and rigid bodies. I also teach MAE 163C and 263C, which is going to be our first time we're teaching control of robotic systems for both undergrads and grads at the same time. One of my favorite spots on campus, there are so many, but I enjoy going to the Court of Sciences area, especially when there are student groups that I can support and they're selling banh mi and boba. That's like my favorite $5 lunch. And my favorite quarantine activity is getting to have lunch with my family, which I don't normally get to do when I'm on campus. And we set up a peanut bar, and we have at least 6 different regulars every day. So that's been a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Great. If there's anyone else also who'd like to introduce themselves and hasn't yet,
I'll pop in. So my name is Alina Haas, and you all get emails from me, so my name should be very familiar. Several of you have met with me in the last couple of weeks even, or exchanged messages, so it's good to see everybody. I don't teach anything, but class planning is probably something I talk about ad nauseum every day, so hit me up if you have questions or need help. My favorite spot on campus, I'm gonna have to say, is the sculpture garden. It really I just wandered around my first month at UCLA, and when I came across that, I was kind of, my breath was kind of taken away of how cool that is, just randomly in the middle of campus. And quarantine activity, I'm not gonna lie, it's Animal Crossing. I discovered it kind of later, and that's basically what I've been doing. I finally unlocked like terraforming and stuff, so it's a lot of time that I spent on it.
All right. I think Peyton is our last co-host, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi guys, I'm the student affairs officer. Unfortunately, I can't turn on my camera right now. My Wi-Fi is being a little bit wonky, but I'm the one that helps out with the scheduling, and I'm looking forward to hearing all your guys' questions and concerns.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. All right, I think that should be all. If not, please go ahead and message me, but for now, let's move on. Next slide.
We have one more. Baran, did you want to introduce yourself, a new faculty member?
Kevin, would you be able to give him mic?
Baran, she's not, I guess she's not able to unmute.
Sorry, who do you want to give co-host privileges?
The Aurora Borealis.
Thank you.
Back.
It's working now, I guess. Thank
Perfect.
you, Rich. So hi, everyone. I'm Baharan. I'm also a new faculty. I've joined CS recently. So currently I'm teaching CS 188, which is supposed to be 141, I believe. It's data science fundamentals. So my favorite spot in the campus, I haven't been there yet. So perhaps my office, because I'm very excited to see that. And my favorite quarantine activity, running. Nice to see you all. I'm hoping that I see you soon in person.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
We have one more. Omid Obari is also here. He's probably going to need some help unmuting as well. Omid Obari.
Yes, I finally can unmute. I don't know why I should be co-host to do that. Hi, everyone. I'm Omid Obari. I'm also a new assistant professor in department. I'm teaching M51, which is Introduction to Digital System. So I have not been in campus. The surprising thing is that even my interview was kind of online. So I haven't seen that much of the campus. So I don't have any favorite place yet. And what's my favorite activity right now? It's teaching. I really enjoy giving lecture, and that's my favorite activity right now.
Cool. Anyone else, Professor Korfer?
I think that may be it.
All right, thanks so much. All right, next slide, Chloe. Okay, so the way this is gonna work, again, I mentioned we had 3 main areas. And so what we did beforehand, a couple weeks ago, we sent out 3 different surveys to basically everyone who is a UCLA student, and they could provide feedback and input, and we had an average of 80 responses on these surveys. So we've gone through and aggregated thoughts that students have and put that in a presentation. So while we're going over these results, professors, if you at any point you want to step in, clarify, make a comment, feel free to unmute yourselves and do that. Also, students, while we're presenting these results, you can ask questions through Slido. So in the bottom left-hand corner, you see that link over there. You can ask questions and they can be anonymous, or you could put your name on it. We just ask that you have the format listed over here, or in square brackets, you mention what category your question falls into, whether that's diversity, curriculum, or honesty, and then ask your question so we can better sort through them. And then other students can upvote the questions you want answered so that we can really address the ones that most students have questions over. So after we go over those survey results, we have a couple guiding questions that Chloe and I will ask to the faculty. Again, faculty, feel free to just unmute yourselves. There's no like ordering here. Whoever wants to answer can answer. And after that, we'll open it up to the Slido QA. So students, for the Slido QA, if you put anonymous, then Chloe or I will say your question. If you do have your name, then you'll get a message from Catherine that says that you're going to be asking your question. She'll let you unmute and you can ask your question at that time. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and get started. I'll pass it off to Chloe to talk about diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, thank you, Rucha. So yeah, we're going to kick off this town hall with our discussion on diversity and inclusion. Just so everyone knows, this is the first year that we've sent out a survey about town hall to specifically discuss this topic. It's always and has been important, and we really wanted to make a special emphasis during tonight's town hall. And thank you to everyone who has taken the time to fill it out. We got around 60 plus or 50 to 60 responses. And so I'll quickly go over kind of what data we've gathered. So we asked several questions here. One is kind of like, I don't really resonate with this question, or don't really resonate with the statement. 5 is like, I really do. So you can see on this slide, the question, do you feel that the image of the UCLA CS community is representative of all students, regardless of background, experience, etc.? From these results, it's there's definitely a skew in terms of students who don't agree that the image is representative. And then for our next question, do you feel like you belong in the CS major? As you can see from these data points, it's kind of all across the board here. So just stats to keep in mind as we move forward with our conversation. Another question we asked is, do you feel like your professors, TAs, and classes are inclusive? Here you can just see, I'll let the data speak for itself. And then to the right is the CS major welcoming to minorities. Again, it's kind of across the board, but leans towards the side of people believing that the CS major is not welcoming to minorities. And we'll continue on. Then again, we had the question, do you feel supported in UCLA CS? Again, a little bit a mixed review, but most people who responded to our survey said 3 or above, so kind of to yes. And then on our right, we just asked the question, a yes or no. Have you ever experienced implicit bias from the UCLA CS community? And we got around a split kind of decision. 53.7% said yes, they have experienced implicit bias from the UCLA CS community, with 46.3% saying no. And we picked out just some focus points from people who filled out the qualitative responses of our survey. Some highlights here is people felt like TAs and students have underestimated my intellect as a woman, or there's also no there seems to be no individualized support for students of color, first-gen students, and students who are completely new to CS. And yeah, and then I'll just kind of let the rest of the statements speak for themselves. I'll kind of give it maybe 10 seconds so you can kind of plug along to the discussion portion. I just wanted to present these here. Yeah, I'll continue on. And then specifically regarding the imposter syndrome, we asked the question, if how much do you agree with these statements? There's too much pressure in the CS major regarding GPA. We kind of get a split, but again, on the higher side, that confirms that there is too much pressure. And whether or not there's too much pressure in the CS major regarding internships, we clearly have a clear data point with almost 39 of the 53 responses voting 5 out of a scale of 1 to 5, that there is too much pressure in the CS major regarding internships. Yeah. And then again, we kind of have too much pressure in the CS major regarding research question here. It's on the lower end, and then the statement, I feel comfortable asking my peers for help, which is again kind of scattered across the board. And then this is, I feel comfortable asking my professors and TAs for help. Again, it's on the more strongly agree side here, which, yeah, all just important data points to keep in mind. I know I went through a lot here, but yeah. And here are just some additional student comments on imposter syndrome. People expressing feelings of inadequacy when other students are getting internships and they're still recruiting. Or some feelings of inadequacy because they don't devote their life to CS like some other students might. And as well as there are some sentiments that people who feel that professors don't care about them and that UCLA culture doesn't really care about them or only their GPA. And then this is just additional comments on regarding the imposter syndrome. Professors who insist on a learn by doing teaching style have always made them feel incredibly inadequate, and not everyone has the same resources. So just kind of going back to that as well. And then this is just some more data points on diversity inclusion in the CS department. I'll just kind of let it stand for itself. People generally believe that the UCLA CS department does not understand the impact of their words and actions, and generally students do not feel that the CS department is actively listening to student input about diversity inclusion. And again, just kind of reemphasizes some of the sentiments earlier on the curriculum course structure of UCLA CS not being friendly to everyone regardless of access to resources or disability. And here's just more testimony, but just for the sake of time, I'm gonna keep going along to our questions so students have time to ask their own and we can facilitate that discussion. But I kind of want to kick off this conversation with a general question to all professors. Again, if you would like to speak, just unmute yourself and go ahead. So our first question we'd like to delve into is what actions or initiatives have been or are currently being taken on a departmental level to address diversity, equity, and inclusion in computer science? And what is the impact of these initiatives?
So I guess I'll speak up. So one of the things that we're doing, and not just in computer science, but we're doing it engineering-wide, and I suspect campus-wide this year, is our faculty recruiting is primarily focused on a set of positions that are called mentor professor positions. And we're looking particularly to recruit faculty who have a very strong record and show a very strong interest in mentoring underrepresented students. And it's pretty much sort of dominating faculty recruiting this year. All of the people that we have interviewed this year have a very strong record in that area. What the impact is, I don't know. Hopefully we will actually be successful in recruiting some of those faculty. We will probably get, in our department, I'm guessing at most one, because the number of positions, even school-wide, is very limited. But that's certainly something that's being done very actively in terms of our faculty recruiting this year.
Thank you, Professor
I
Clark.
want
And I
to-
see that Professor Kim.
All right. So I think there were discussions on imposter phenomenon. I just wanted to share with everyone that I have been offering fiat locks together with Monica Hanna and Marcus Royster, who are resident directors on the Hill, on the topic on imposter phenomenon. So this is like bi-weekly. We meet every 2 weeks, but it is both lecture and discussion, like small group discussions, and we analyze like imposter phenomenon, or like read the literature, or you know, watch like videos. So it's actually now very well organized because we offer multiple times. So I think one is, this is not just about computer science. I think actually many students across the campus is you know, in some way or another, understanding how UCLA environment could give them this feeling or like experience of imposter, because they are all like, you know, excellent student in their high school, and then they are now being in UCLA. So I want to just stress that this is I find it common among first year experience, not just to CS and engineering student. And two, I think there are a lot of materials available on campus and also outside too, which could be very helpful. Yeah.
Can I jump in? I'll add that Audrey Poole O'Neill, who is the director of our Women in Engineering at UCLA, and her team have developed a pretty comprehensive set of modules called Awareness to Action, or A2A training. There's a module on gender bias. There's a module on race bias. They started deploying it, I believe, last year in engineering ethics courses. And so it's been deployed to 100+ students so far. And I think that is going to begin to be a more regular thing that you'll see, especially in the earlier classes. I believe that Dr. Poole O'Neill will be introducing this type of training into her Engineering 2 course in the spring. So it's, as far as educating faculty, staff, and especially students, we're working on that.
Professor Milstein, I see you've raised your hand if you want to go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, you sound good.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that CS30, which I created and started teaching 3 years ago, was really in response to some of these issues. It was part of our application to join the BRAID organization, which is run by the Anita Borg Foundation, trying to increase diversity of the undergraduate population. And, you know, it's really meant as a way to lift everyone who's interested into the major, anyone who has an interest in computing, to be able to succeed in the major and give them the confidence and the background to succeed in the major. That's really the goal of it. So it's sort of the opposite of a weed out class. It's sort of a class where, you know, it's meant to help you succeed and move on in the curriculum. And it's a little bit early because it's only been happening for a few years, but I think it really has helped several people kind of find their passion for computing who might not have otherwise, who didn't have experience coming in from high school, et cetera. So I think that's one initiative we've been taking as a department.
Thank you all for your responses, and kind of going off of that leads us perfectly into our next question is, how have you personally taken action to learn about diversity and equity issues and ensure inclusion in your classrooms? We have so many amazing professors here, so we'd love to hear from you all.
So I'll take a shot at this. This past fall, I attended a workshop that was sponsored by the Center for Teaching on campus about diversity and equity issues, which is very interesting. I recently completed I guess it was about a 3-hour course in implicit bias training, which I found very interesting and enlightening. Another thing that, since this mental health issue is brought up, everyone ought to know is that one of the classes I teach, I didn't say what I taught. So one of the classes I teach is our TA training seminar. So all of your TAs take a class that where they learn a lot about teaching and other issues as well. And a part of that program is actually an entire class that's focused on having TAs become more aware of recognizing mental health issues in their students and how to refer them to help to the appropriate to CAPS and other groups on campus with regard to that. So that's not me personally. I certainly participate in those things, but not as an expert as simply the instructor of the class. And so all of our TAs get all of that training every year as part of 495.
I also want to just add that Dean Wessel meets with new professors, and he has a series that he goes through and has like weekly meetings with them that include a lot of the stuff, including like empathy training and just like all of the resources on campus and how to kind of connect with your students and kind of faculty teaching faculty, like the do's and don'ts of being a good teacher kind of thing, and also what's available at UCLA. So that's kind of like built in also for new faculty coming in. And don't forget about the drop-in advising that's specific to engineering for CAPS. So if you're struggling, you have free consultations that you can just meet with a CAPS counselor immediately, but that's not really an official sign up for CAPS and get into make a real appointment. It's kind of like just a consultation. And that happens every week too.
I'll mention something else that everyone probably in the audience may not be aware of, although I'm sure many are. One of the things I've been doing very recently, including today, is I've been involved in admissions, freshman admissions for engineering. And there's a number of faculty that are actually reading applications and rating applications. And one of the things that, if you don't know, you should know, is that there is no information on any of the applications that indicates race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, or anything of that sort. All those applications are scrubbed to what information is there. Now, people may mention things in their statements and such, but the reason that those things are not explicitly listed is because of Prop 209, which was passed about 20 years ago. We're not actually allowed in UCLA admissions, any UC admissions, to take into consideration any of those issues. So we are not allowed to, either discriminate against, of course, nor give preferences to people based on that information. And so in the application form, that information is just not there at all. The other thing I want to say is, after reading these applications, my esteem for our undergraduate students has been raised immensely, because now I see what it takes to get into this place, and we're only reading the ones for the people that are close, and the applications are just amazing.
Professor Sun, you have your hand raised.
Yes, so I just want to add on that right now, computer science, we are working on like summer institute for high school students. So one of the mission of this summer institute is try to build the pipelines for our like community, because we want to like give like opportunities for the high school students who are underrepresented. Then we give them the chance to know what UCLA is doing. Actually, Adrian Submarian, right? So who is also the outreach director of ACM. Actually, he is helping us to recruit like undergraduate TA for the summer institute. I think that will give us a great opportunity to like really attract students with the underrepresented background, and to give them the chance to know more about UCLA and maybe join UCLA in the future.
Thank you so much. We're gonna actually head on and focus on one of our student submitted questions. So Matt Long, if you want to go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
By the way, can I also add another point that if I
yeah, go ahead, Professor Kong. Yeah, and then Matt will go right after you. Yeah.
Okay. So just regarding diversity, I think the important aspect is to increase the pipeline, that we got to get more students that from middle school, high school with diverse background interested in doing science and engineering. So in that context, that the center I'm directing, the Center for Domain-Specific Computing, had a summer research program where we partner with the SMART program, with SEED, that we do have this wonderful organization within the school. We made a number of high school students with a diverse background to do research. Right now, it's a little bit challenging because given that everything is remote, but we did that very successfully for several years. We plan to resume that once we go back to online. So that's number one. Number two is that I'm also very alarmed by the mental health issue. I read science magazines every week. This become a front page article that in a science magazine that they're talking about the percentage, the students, the population actually with mental health during this quarantine time. So I also took, for example, voluntarily took a class, a 3-hour training on suicide prevention. And there actually they have a lot of information that's even at the place at UCLA, it's uncommon that how high the percentage of the students that have this thought. And they tell you techniques, how do you communicate with students, how to guide them going through the difficult period of time. So that's the effort on my side. And as Professor Korf says, the department has a significant effort on that enriching the diversity as well.
Thank you so much, Professor, for your response.
I'm sorry, I'm unable to raise my virtual Zoom hand. Can I add something?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
At the engineering school level, we have a new standing committee on diversity that includes a really diverse set of committee members that span undergrad, grad, the different tri-org organizations that form the Center for Excellence in Engineering and Diversity. We have staff representation, dean and associate dean representation, even representation from alumni and folks who are interested in equity, diversity, inclusion from outside engineering. And then we also have 4 subcommittees that I'm working on fleshing out the membership right now, but there will be a subcommittee on undergraduate student recruitment, another on graduate student recruitment, another on climate, how to assess and improve the climate across all of engineering, as well as faculty hiring. So I see these all as pathways for us to improve our diversity, equity, inclusion in all departments, including CS. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, Matt, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Matt. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a third-year CS major. This actually segues really well from what the previous professors just talked about. So this year, the engineering department released the UCEE report, which reports on the pipeline and admissions for engineering majors. And this year, the computer science major actually regressed in minority and female enrollment. And compared to other engineering majors and other majors at school, that's significantly below par, let alone compared to other UCs or schools of a similar caliber. So I'm particularly interested, what kinds of actions from a school or CS department level are we making to remedy this gap in the pipeline compared to engineering-wide efforts like SEED or this committee, for example?
So I guess I want to ask to clarify, I have not seen this report. Are you saying that the number of minority students in CS at UCLA has decreased in most recently?
Oh, Matt, you're muted.
Muted.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. So I just posted a link to the report. It's published by the engineering department every single year by the Office of Enrollment. And yeah, so year on year, we had, I believe, more women enrolled, but less minorities enrolled into the CS major specifically. And we saw a decrease overall of minorities enrolled in the engineering department.
So I'm not sure what tools we have available to us in terms of in terms of applications enrollment. As I just mentioned, we're actually not allowed to sort of take those things into consideration. It's certainly something we ought to look at and see, to pay attention what these trends are. But I'm not sure that we have too many direct levers at this point, direct levers, for example, in the admissions process to remedy that directly. I think it's going to have to be in terms of our outreach, in terms of, for example, the program that Icho's son talked about in terms of Summer Institute and getting people interested and involved in these things and some of the things we do when we're already here. But there's not very much that we can do directly in terms of admissions that I'm aware of.
Regarding pipeline, I can comment that we recently received a new gift to enhance a math achievement program, and we're going to be really pushing on outreach to middle school and high school. I attended a meeting with Black student leaders and engineering school leadership today, and one of the student leaders had a really great suggestion, which was to reach out to high school counselors, because high school counselors are the ones who are helping to encourage students to apply. And oftentimes students might have straight A's, but they feel like if they bomb the SAT that they don't stand a chance and they don't even apply. But one of the great things now about the UC system is that standardized test scores like SAT scores are no longer required. We don't actually see them when we review and rate the applications. And so we have already seen numbers-wise a huge influx in the number of students applying and an increase in diversity in the students applying. So I hope to see some of this, some of the numbers improve with our next incoming class of freshmen.
Thank you to both professors for your responses. If no other person wants to jump in, I'll move on to our next question. Okay, so our next question is an anonymously submitted question on our Slido. We're combining two because they cover the same topic and they total up to around 60 upvotes. So just want to emphasize that this is a question that a lot of students kind of want the answer to. So the question is, how have and will the CS department address Professor Gaffney's actions as department chair? His previous actions do not embody UCLA engineering values. And then the other question is, why is our department chair Gaffney not here today, especially considering his absence from last year's town hall as well?
Professor Gaffney may be joining us later. He informed me that he had a long-term family obligation that would keep him busy for the early part of the evening, and he wasn't sure if he'd be able to make it, but that's the reason he's not here directly. In terms of this other issue, I'm afraid there's just not very much that I can really say about it. For the most part, I'm not aware of what in particular is going on, and unfortunately, I understand that it's frustrating, and I understand where this question is coming from, but unfortunately, in this sort of forum, there's really very little that can be said, and I personally have very little information about whatever process may or may not be underway at this point.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Korf. Do any other professors have anything to add? If not, we'll move on to another student question. Okay, we'll move on to Arjun. If you would like to unmute yourself and ask your question, please do so now.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. My question is, how is the department supporting LGBTQIA plus students?
So I'm not aware of specific departmental-wide issues. I think that my view, and I think this is shared by most of the faculty, is that we all try very hard to treat everyone with respect and compassion. And so I'm not aware that we have any specific programs addressing this group, but I think, to a person, we're all very, we certainly strive to be as respectful and open-minded as we can about, any sort of lifestyle choices. And, I know that, the vast majority of us really have that very deeply in our hearts and minds. And I mean, I can tell you personally, what I do is I am generally not aware of the orientation of my students. For the most part, I don't really want to be aware. If a student comes to me with an issue, I certainly try to speak to them about whatever concerns they may have. But my approach to this issue, and it may not be entirely satisfying, is primarily to treat all students the same, regardless of that issue or other identifying issues.
I'd like to follow that comment by saying that there are also faculty who recognize that student differences are important, different lived experiences are important, and we want to treat students equitably, but I welcome that type of information. So I just hope that students recognize that I have an open door policy, and if you feel that there are things that should be done better to improve equity for students in our school, please let me know.
One thing also, we support things like Queer Hacks, right? We announced them about these hackathons in our classes, and in general, just have an open door policy for anybody that does want to come talk about these things. And I, for one, have talked to a number of people who identify as LGBTQIA and try to coach them when people do approach me. So, personal experience.
Would any other professors like to hop in?
I guess I should respond to the comment in the chat. If I referred to this as a lifestyle choice, then I misspoke, and I apologize for that. It certainly is not a choice, and I don't believe that. And so I would apologize if that's what I said.
Okay, thank you so much to all the professors for your responses. We have now Jessica will ask a question. It's actually kind of a follow-up to the one Arjun just asked. So Jessica, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, first off, thank you so much for having this conversation with us. My name is Jessica. I am the advocacy chair for UPE. So I guess my follow-up is my experiences as a person, as a member of the LGBTQ+ community has been, kind of different. And my journey has been, impacted by this kind of, aspect of my life. So I want to hear more about, since Professor Korf has mentioned that there hasn't really been much of a departmental effort to really, be aware of the context of, their students in this area. What are some ways the department, can support their students, or how can the department include questions of LGBTQ+ inclusion in its discussions about diversity?
So I will give an example which may not be very satisfying, but one thing is, I think it's important for us as faculty to sort of be aware of when people are not taking into account these other sorts of points of view. And I will give an example. This is actually from my TA training class, where we were talking about the matching algorithm, the stable matching algorithm. And the stable matching algorithm, what you have is you have two sets of people, and the way it's often described is as the stable marriage problem. And so the way the student was describing it was saying, okay, so we have a bunch of men and we have a bunch of women, and they have various preferences, and it's a computer science algorithm problem to figure out how to do the matching efficiently. And one thing that they pointed out after all of that, one of the things we do, students give these presentations, and then the other students and the faculty critique them and such. And the issue I raised in that situation was we had a discussion about the fact that in the student's example, it was, all the males were on one side and all the females were on the other side. And so it was talking about matching between men and women. And so we had a discussion about what's the best way to sort of deal with that kind of things. I thought this was a teachable moment. And kind of the conclusion we came to is that, any sort of discussion like that should at least probably be prefaced. And if I were to do it again, to say, it is a classic presentation of the problem. It does help a little bit in recognizing two different sides, but I certainly would preface it by saying, this is old-fashioned heterosexual relationships we're talking about for the purposes of this, and not trying to be exclusive or support that particular view, but just to remind people that these biases do come up, and people share them implicitly, and I'm sure, relatively, a number of people in the room probably didn't appreciate that this was being expressed there. And I think it's worthwhile in terms of climate for us as faculty to be aware of these kinds of things and remind students that, everyone, everyone has different experiences and should not focus on one particular normative aspect, even in technical examples.
Thank you so much. Do any other professors want to add? We did get feedback from students that they would like to hear from more professors, since there are so many here tonight and have devoted their time.
Well, I'll chime in a little bit. I think one of the things that we've done and perhaps should do more of is support students. I recall that ACM got a prize because, for best student group of some sort or another, because of ACMW's work in the LGBTQ area, right? And, as faculty, we should be, celebrating that and encouraging more of that. And I think we've been doing that so far, but, there's obviously more work that can be done.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I would just say that, one thing that strikes me hearing these questions is that, I think we also, this may sound like a cop-out, but I'm not meaning it in that way. I think that we would really value your ideas. So if you think there are ways that, it's easy for us to just sort of like, it's like, from our point of view, it's like you show up to lecture, you give your lecture, we're seeing you in very narrow confines. And I think if you're seeing in some ways the bigger picture in a better way than we are, and if you have context that can help us, or ways that you think you or groups of people, students, would like to be supported better, then I think I'll speak on behalf of Professor Korf, who's the vice chair for undergraduate studies, but I think we would welcome your ideas and feedback along those lines, because really, we don't have all the answers. I think there's a lot of, brain power on this call among all of you, and your ideas are as important, if not more important, than sort of our ideas on how to handle and how to improve the department. So just a general comment.
One quick point. One thing I've been trying to do, at least in my virtual classes, and this is new for me, I don't know how well it's working, is bring in people of all kinds of backgrounds who are working in the high-tech industry, who are either former alums or who are working in the industry that I know. And we've had all types of people of different genders and different sexual orientations and so on. And so I hope that at least in our class, in my class, that everybody feels like everybody's welcome and that everybody participates in this field and that there's an opportunity for everybody. And I don't particularly want to go and single out any, actually I have actually asked questions in class. In other words, how are people affected by the workplace? Do they feel impacted because of their gender? I haven't asked about sexual orientation in class, but I have asked these questions. And I've tried to solicit views from people who are in industry to share people's learnings. Actually, I've had some interesting feedback where people actually felt like calling these things out is actually problematic. So I think there are a diverse set of views. Some people want to highlight this. Other people just want to be people and just want to share and learn about other common experiences. So I think it's pretty complex, but I know that we're really trying to be inclusive as possible, at least from my vantage.
Thank you so much to all the professors who responded to the last question. Unfortunately, we just have time for one more question. This one comes from an anonymous asker. Oh, I lost the question. So the question is, transition efforts of the imposter syndrome for freshman seminars are made, but transfer students are still lacking in catching up to third-year peers. What can the department do to address this issue?
So I'm not sure I understood the question. Could you restate it again?
Yeah, sorry, let me restate it. Transition efforts of the imposter syndrome for freshman seminars are made, but transfer students are still lacking in quote unquote catching up to third-year peers. What can be done about essentially making sure that transfer students have this sort of transition that freshman students are given?
So one thing I know that we do, and maybe Alina can say a little bit more about, is we have a special orientation specifically for transfer students. It sort of models the sort of Bruin Day activities. We do it at two levels. One is in terms of recruiting students after admissions decisions go out. So there's a program for transfer students. And then also the orientations, there is a separate, I believe, transfer orientation separate from the freshman orientation for incoming students because they face different issues.
Since you called me out, I think that there is some gaps that need to be filled, and that's something that our office is looking at and trying to get data on so that we can get resources to create these things. Like, I would love to have a CS 31, 32 assessment for incoming transfers so they can kind of vet their prior experience and really know they're prepared to move on. So a lot of times they come in with credit for 31 or 32, and then they try to take the next class and they are not prepared and have to almost go back, but they wasted a whole quarter waiting for 32 to be offered in the winter or something like that. And it's difficult for them to know the depth of the topic that's being taught. So it really needs to be more like an assessment because they have the topics checked, they know the information, but maybe not well enough to move on. And that's something that Wes Uehara in the Transfer Center is really working hard with some faculty to try to figure out a way to kind of find out what those gaps are, identify them, and make modules maybe to help people over the summer before they start in the fall.
Do any other professors have anything to say on the matter? There are also some comments in the chat in case anyone wants to respond to them.
So I don't know if the transfer students are getting a subset. I suspect they will have a different background. And I know the Office of Academic and Student Affairs works very hard with transfer students to try to give them sort of the appropriate orientation and advice. So I think it's a somewhat different group of students. And I don't view as, one group getting more than another, other than the fact that, our freshmen who come in here are here longer than our transfer students.
I'll add one thing. I think the transfer students who came in last year and graduating this year, I just got a terrible deal. And it's because they were expecting 2 years on campus at UCLA. They got what, 5 months, 6 months, and then they're stuck doing remote. I mean, it's just been a disaster. And I suppose it's easy for me to point the finger at coronavirus, but to some extent, that's on us as well, right? It's been a real problem. I wish I could say we've done a great job handling it, but I'm afraid I can't say that.
For the orientation days, that's set by the campus. the sessions that we have with the students is also just the same 2 hours. We get 2 hours with the freshmen and 2 hours with the transfers. And so I'm not 100% sure what the new student and transition programs thought process is behind having transfer only being 1 day versus the freshman 3 days with family activities and everything. But if you want to leave feedback for them, you can connect with our office and we'll get you connected to them.
Thank you so much to all of the professors and to Lena and the department for your responses to our discussion here. Now we're going to head into our break. So it's going to just be 5 minutes. So let's return around 7:08, and then we'll continue on with academic curriculum.
All right, it is 7:08, so let's get back to it. Again, thank you to everyone who submitted questions. If we didn't have time to get to yours, we'll be sure to include them in our notes and follow up afterwards. All right, so for now, let's move on to academic curriculum. So this is everything from classes to requirements to structure to format. All right, next slide. Let's start off with our current curriculum. So we'll look at how requirements are currently structured across CS, CSE, and CE. So everyone has a bit of a refresher before we get into asking questions. Next slide. All right, so this is the lower division curriculum for CS, CSE, and CE listed with the changes there. So in recent years, we have had a couple updates. So for example, updating CS35L with CS97 material, the addition of CS30 to help facilitate that transition into 31. And previously, both physics 4AL and 4BL used to be required, and now there's only one. And finally, the introduction of learning assistants to our curriculum. Next slide. All right, so our upper division currently looks like this across CS, CSE, and CE. So we can see CS and CSE are pretty similar. You have 8 required CS courses for the first 2, and for the third, it's around 5. And again, we have 5 to 4 CS electives across all of these 3. So next slide. Again, there have been changes in recent years here as well. Most recently, we added digital humanities as a tech breadth area. There was also removed restrictions on CS electives like CS 112 and CS 170A, as well as updated requirements for CSE, replacing some classes, and adding new offerings of CS 188, which if you don't know, they're kind of our experimental course numbers. So scalable internet services, HCI, distributed systems, computer vision, distributed algorithms, and blockchain. And this also came up as many students were addressing the concern of more industry track related courses and group project based courses. And so these courses were introduced to address that a little bit. All right, next slide. All right, so we got over 90 responses on this survey for our academic curriculum. Most of these responses were computer science majors, a lot of CSE majors as well. Again, with an overwhelming majority of people who came to UCLA from a high school, but also people who came from community colleges. And again, pretty even split, a lot of second and third years responding to this. So keeping that in mind as we go on. All right, next slide. So we asked students what courses that they really enjoyed. And so the most enjoyable courses in order according to this were CS31, CS32, CS33, M51A, 180, and 161. Again, keeping in mind that a lot of the people who have responded to this have already taken these lower divs, but those were our responses over here. Next slide. We also asked students what made these courses enjoyable. And a lot of them were listing things like it was super engaging, the workload was easy to manage, there was also applicability mentioned, whether that's in day-to-day work or job interviews. So I'll give a couple seconds in case anyone wants to read these responses as is. All right, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so we also asked students what courses they would want to see changes in. And the top courses that we got from this were CS 111, 152A, 131, and CS1. We also had included 35L in here, but since it has been revamped, we also included 97. And so we did not include CS 35L in this list that is here, since that has been revamped and we included 97. So next slide. Again, we asked what specific changes you would make to these courses. And so for CSM 152A, I think every year we kind of notice that this issue comes up of relevance to CS, and we have an extensive talk about it, but it seems like students are still finding that M152A, they're questioning its relevance to CS. There's also support for replacing it with a more applicable requirement, like a current elective, like CS 143. That was one of the comments we got. We also, for CS 111 and 131, one of the major concerns we saw was a heavy workload, and that projects weren't necessarily incorporating all of the lecture material. There seemed to be kind of a disconnect that students saw between the two. And the third one was that students really wanted to see more checkpoints and grading scripts so they could see where they were at with the current projects as well. Next slide. Okay, so we also asked what future CS course offerings that students want to see. We saw a lot of increase in CS ethics, social impact, and public policy as courses that students wanted to see, as well as quantum computing, complexity theory, mobile and web development, UI UX, and cryptography and cybersecurity. I do believe cryptography was offered this past year, but I guess it also is like how often it is offered is a question there as well. All right, next slide. We also wanted to see what is the ease of fulfilling requirements. So our first question was, how easy is it to navigate or figure out which courses are mandatory to fulfill requirements? And so we saw that we could be doing better here. You know, whether that's like having more online resources to help with that or increasing awareness for resources are currently available. We also asked if you sought help from HC's academic office or counselors, how helpful was the support? And we did see that it was generally helpful. Next question. We asked students how UCLA CS curriculum compares with those offered at peer institutions, and we saw 3 pop up over and over again. It was Stanford, Berkeley, and UCSD. For Stanford, a lot of students mentioned that they liked that students could choose specific tracks such as AI, HCI, graphics, and theory. They also did have classes like coding for social good, which again hits on that area that the other question kind of touched on. And also a wider range of courses in modern deep learning is something that Stanford offers. For Berkeley, one of the main things that people were mentioning were student-led classes via the DCAL program, and we'll delve into this a little bit later as well. Berkeley also has a wider variety of tech electives courses from psychology to music to anthropology. Finally, UCSD has a lot of hybrid courses that include stuff like Music 177, so kind of more intersections than we necessarily offer, and also many courses on computer graphics and computer vision. Next slide. Then we asked kind of a broad question. How can UCLA CS further improve the curriculum? And so we saw responses like available grading scripts would be super helpful, checkpoints, more lecturers, industry professors, recording lectures. A lot of students said this was something that was really nice that came out of remote learning, that they really enjoyed being able to rewatch them and watch them at their own speed. Another thing students mentioned were more tech breadth options, less physics, study abroad, and again, those grading scripts to make sure you're on the right track. So in addition to this, there were 3 things as well. Students' involvement in curriculum development was something that people wanted to see more of, as well as mid-quarter feedback to professors. I think this comment in particular mentioned that we have end of the quarter feedback, but nothing really in the middle, which can help professors kind of adjust their courses for the rest of the year. Another idea was expanding USIE to something more like Berkeley's DCAL program, which, as we mentioned, were student-led courses that you get credit for. And finally, just revisiting requirements. Physics and M152A in particular were brought up a lot. Next slide. All right, then we asked about research. How interested are you in doing research? And it looked like pretty much a normal distribution. But in addition to this, we also asked if you are involved in CS research, how did you find this opportunity? And on the other hand, if you have interest but aren't yet involved, what are the primary roadblocks? And so opportunities people found by cold emailing professors, social media, and contacting professors after taking their classes. When it came to roadblocks, we got responses such as, I'm not sure if I know enough to do research and I don't know how to approach professors and get started. Finding opportunities is difficult, having the requested experience. It's hard to get a position without prior experience. And 3, I've cold emailed many professors, but it seems like I'm either underqualified or they don't want undergraduates. All right, next slide. So that kind of wraps up the survey portion of it. And we do have a couple guiding questions to start off with. So first one, are there any talks about changing the ratio of required courses to electives? Many students have expressed interest in taking more elective courses to cater to their particular interests.
So I will express my opinion on this. First of all, I think it's, we have made some changes kind of around the edges to the curriculum, and we're probably due at this point for sort of a major revamp of the curriculum. That's something we probably ought to take on. So, things have been relatively the same for quite a long period of time. I will tell you my personal view on this, and it's not necessarily dispositive, but there's kind of always a trade-off between required courses and elective courses. And my feeling about that is, at one extreme, we could say we'll make everything elective. And my concern about that is students will choose what they're most interested in and may not get a broad education. The other spectrum, we could make everything required. And in my view is that to some extent, it's the faculty's job to tell the students, here's the stuff that's really important that everyone needs to take, and you really should take this, and make those the required classes, make it the minimum set, and then leave it up to the students to choose electives. We obviously have something in between. I can certainly sympathize from a student point of view that you'd like to have more electives and fewer required courses, but I actually think there's some value in sort of having required courses in that the faculty say, these are really basic things that everyone really should know and needs to know to be a well-rounded computer scientist. And as a result, we're going to make those required courses and then give you the option to choose what you want to do as electives.
Any other professors want to chime in?
I want to second Richard, and another aspect of it is we don't want to have a race for the bottom. I think we have to admit to ourselves that some students want to get through the program the easiest way. And we know that there are courses which are easier than the other. And even the same courses, there are professors that are easier than the other. And there are some courses, if we start to have, let's say, take it to the extreme of everything is elective, I'm afraid that many students, and this will be essentially what Rich says, will not get the education because they will just take the amount, the easiest way to slip down and finish the degree. Not all. For some students, it will be the best thing. And you can do it, there is some not kindergartens, let's say schools, elementary schools, but very few that actually, it's do whatever you want and there will not be grades and things like that. Some can do it, but in general, being like a state school, I don't think we can do it.
So my experience in looking at enrollment and such, it's very clear, and I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know, that some faculty are much more popular than other faculty, and I understand that. My sense is it's not, there may be a few students that are kind of looking for an easy way out, but my sense is there's very few, and predominantly I think what's going on is students appreciate, the teaching styles of some faculty more than others. And I think, the sort of the choices among faculty for particular classes is, I think, primarily driven by where students feel that they're going to learn the most and get the most out of it. I don't have much of a concern at all about students, trying to find an easy way out. I think, you folks are so good and so talented that I don't think that's an issue that we need to be worried about, in my opinion.
All right, thank you for your responses. So let's move on to the second guiding question, which is many other universities offer student-led courses for credit, such as UC Berkeley's DECAL program, which offers 1 to 2 unit classes that cover more modern topics, allowing for students to explore these interests. Is the CS department open to running a similar program?
So we have a similar program, I think called USIE. It exists all over campus, and we have had students teach courses. And the way it works is it's fairly rigorous. The students go through, it's actually a 1-year course for the student where they go through 2 quarters of pedagogy where they learn how to teach and how to do lesson plans and all of that. And then usually in the spring quarter, they actually teach their class. It's usually I think it's usually 1 unit. And we've had a number of students who've done those classes, and almost every year we usually have 1 or 2. So this is a program that we have, and I'm not going to remember exactly what the acronym is USIE. Someone can probably remind me what that refers to, but there absolutely exists a program on campus where undergraduate students can teach courses for credit.
So I believe the USIE program, it can't have any prereqs. And so I believe some of the student concern was that they want to have CS specific classes that require that you've taken CS 31 or 32, rather than have something be totally open with no prereqs, because then you can't get into as much detail.
Well, there might be in a way, in some sense, I mean, you may be right, and there may be a way around that, and simply saying, here's what we're going to cover. Here's kind of what we're going to expect without listing specific prerequisites. I don't think there's going to, and I think if the course is sort of advertised, honestly, this is what we're going to cover, and we sort of hope people have the following sort of background. I think there may be a way around that.
I've actually worked with a student to do that, and I would like to really encourage any of you interested in offering a course like this to look into the USIE program. I had a great experience with a student that I sort of supervised. I mean, he did all the work in doing such a program, and I feel that that experience helped him and helped me, as some of that got folded into the CS 97, which is going to be the new CS 35L. So more, please.
I'll also respond to Alina's comment in the chat that yes, the students who do that do get credit for teaching those courses as well, in addition to the students taking the courses getting credit.
Right.
I just had a course about blockchain. I know the theory of blockchain. I bought some Bitcoins. A student helped me buy the Bitcoins. So there is aspect of actually going and getting your hands wet in programming and the blockchains. And I had learning assistant students that dealt with all the more programming, the more practical aspect of it. They essentially did more than half of the class. And it was a great experience. Undergraduate students, they were employed as learning assistants, and it was a great experience. And I think this is a sort of a nice division of labor, that I do what I'm good at. I'm a bad programmer, and they did what they are good at.
Great. Thank you all for your responses. Next, we have an anonymous question from the Slido that says, some students, especially non-traditional ones, find recorded lectures to be very helpful to their studies. Does the department plan to continue this after COVID?
So I don't know the answer to that question. I suspect there are a number of things that we have done during quarantine, and I've noticed some myself that actually make things better. I mean, on the whole, it's been worse, and I'd much rather have taught in front of the class. But one of the aspects that certainly made things better, I think, is recorded classes. And I think there's going to be a lot of pressure by students to continue that. And I would frankly like to see it. The issue I see, if I think about this, is it may be challenging to actually do that. There are some classrooms that are equipped on campus for doing video recording. Most are not. I would hope that maybe there will be more impetus to do that. But I certainly would like to see it. But it's not going to be. It's going to be difficult for sort of the department to do it on its own. So what can easily be done is those faculty, for example, that are teaching with slides. It seems to me technologically it'd be pretty easy to record that and record the audio. What I think might be difficult is people like myself and others who teach at a blackboard and wander around, one side of the class to the other. In order to record that is going to require either a human operator or some good technology to sort of track the individual to actually do that. And there probably will not be the resources to have a videographer, recording every class sort of thing. I've got some ideas that how that might be able to be done technologically. I think it's a great idea. It will take some resources to do it in general. I don't know if the university is going to, to be able to do that in general.
The university already does offer video recording for the largest classes every quarter. Those of us who teach the really huge classes do get an invitation to have it recorded. So it's just a matter, their limit is on the number of people they have. They need a human operator to move the camera around if you walk around a lot. Some of the rooms are equipped with cameras that don't move, but that means you have to stay in one place.
Any other professors want to chime in?
I thought about this question, and I do the Zoom when I teach. I write on the board. I don't have a background. You can see a board in my background. I write on the board, and I thought, what if the board is bigger and I want to go? If I have a laptop, I can be also the cameraman. And sort of, when I move from one side of the laptop to the other, and from one side of the board to the other, just move the laptop. So I don't think that it's such a big problem if we want to do it, and I think it's a good idea to do it.
Great, thank you so much, everyone. Next question we have is from Maya.
Yeah, so my question was, I believe that the intent of the Tech Breath and Sci-Tech electives are to provide us with opportunities to take non-computer science classes. But I was wondering if we could have more non-STEM offerings for that, like political science or English or something, because that's stuff that I'm interested in. Or I know that there is an opportunity to petition for those, but is it possible to make that petition process more transparent? Because it takes a long time and you don't know like what will be accepted and stuff.
So, well, Tech Breadth and Sci-Tech are slightly different, right? Sci-Tech is supposed to be for science and technology courses. And in fact, you can take your Sci-Tech and computer science if you want. Tech Breadth is supposed to be outside of computer science. And there's a very standard set of options that are on the OASA website. And it's probably unfortunate that most students just kind of look at that and choose those. But we certainly are open to, receiving petitions for more novel combinations. In terms of, I handle most of those petitions. I try to turn them around as quickly as I can. There used to be more of a backlog than recently. We started doing it electronically out of necessity, and I think we've been able to turn them around faster. In terms of transparency, the process is, one submits a petition, puts in the arguments. I review them often with one of the OASA counselors and make a decision about whether to approve it or not. And I certainly would be, we certainly would welcome students, petitioning things that are non-traditional. I can't say that they're all going to be approved, but there is a process for doing that, and it probably would be, it's good for students to be aware and understand that you're not restricted to the standard options, but you do have the option to petition other sorts of options that you might like.
And I will say that for the process is literally you submit the petition, I prep it, see if there's anything else I need. Rich Korf reviews it. He tells me what the result is. And if it's a no, he usually gives me some sort of answer so I can let you know why. But if it's approved, we have to manually go in for every petition we receive and enter the exception into DARS. So if we got 200 petitions that week, it might take us a while to get them all inputted, which is why we try to tell you the answer before you might see it reflect. And there have been a lot. You can always ask one of our counselors. We have lists of what's been previously approved in other areas. And so I know the other classes that have been approved in sociology or communications or digital humanities. Political science is new. There is a petition under review, but so we'll have those results eventually too. So you can be creative with what you're asking for. And I know that Rich has talked to students who he did say no to, and they discussed it a little bit more so they understood exactly what he was looking for and stuff like that. So you can get really into here. And Pranav, just send me a message and I'll send you what's been approved in the past.
Right. Our next question is from Rish.
Hi, so my question is kind of regarding practical classes, and I know we have made some steps in offering more practical classes here at UCLA, but what classes do you imagine UCLA offering in the near future? I know, for example, Berkeley has kind of revamped their intro courses to use Python and start submitting their code through GitHub to get students to used to technologies like that. What steps do you anticipate that UCLA is planning on taking, or something along those lines?
So I guess there's two parts to that. One is the intro, and the other is, sort of more upper division kinds of things. As I said, I think we're probably due for a major sort of overhaul of the curriculum, but it's not something that's going to happen, overnight. That's a fairly large process. I've certainly heard arguments that, and I have some sympathy for arguments that maybe our intro sequence should be in a different language. And I think at some point we're going to look at that. I don't know what the outcome of that would be. In terms of new courses, we do try to offer new courses on a regular basis. They usually start out as 188s and then they become regular classes. Just to give you some recent examples, we have a course in fundamentals of data science, which started out as a 188 and it will get its own number. I don't recall, I think it's 148 will be the new number of that course. We have another course that's been offered a couple of times now in computer vision that's being jointly taught by a faculty member, Professor Sawato in our department and Professor Kadambi in ECE. I imagine at some point that will become a regular course as well. We're looking at offering possibly a new course in natural language processing. And so that will probably be first offered as a 188 and then presumably at some point become a regular course. These are the ones that come to mind most recently, but we're always, looking for, new courses. We did human-computer interaction a couple quarters, and we had people to teach it, and those instructors are not available anymore. So unfortunately, we're not able to continue that. But we certainly are, we do what we can to offer new courses when we have the resources for it, and certainly, open to suggestions as well.
In terms of new technology, Berkeley's, doing Python in lower division now. We've been doing Python in lower division since, what was it, 2009? I'm not sure. It's just that we're not doing it at the intro class. We're doing it at the 35L class, right, level, right? We're doing it perhaps in a different order. Also, we've in the recent revamp, which is scheduled to hit 35L next quarter, we're doing things like JavaScript and Node and React, which are all, reasonably basic technologies now, but relatively new. And, we're doing it at that level rather than at, sort of throwing this stuff at people at the very, very first course.
Right. Anyone else? All right, then our next question is from Mega.
Hello, my name is Mega, she, her pronouns. I'm currently a senior here at UCLA. And in my experience, many of the computer science classes I've taken, and I've taken all the required courses except for 130 at this point. A lot of these courses, especially CS 111 and 131, have pretty unreasonable workloads. I personally have spent 20 to 40 hours per assignment on top of lecture and studying for exams, and I'm sure that experience isn't unique to me. So this is overwhelming for any students, and especially students with jobs, extracurricular work, research commitments, or any other personal commitment that they might have in order to lead whole and balanced lives outside of their academic curriculum. And it potentially gates certain groups of students from the major and negatively affects students' mental health. So I wanted to ask, what is being done to make workloads more manageable for students, especially in courses like these?
So I think what we need to do, with this information that some of these things are overloaded is I need to go back and talk to the instructors of these classes. And I have a note of the ones that you've mentioned and see, what can be done about it. The 111 I'm aware of. I think it's not something that the department, I think that's going to involve, sort of a conversation between myself and the instructors of those courses to see, what we can do about it. I believe that 111 has 5 units, and that's not really an excuse, but I think, when you tell us there are courses that are just unreasonable in terms of their workload, I think, I hear that, and what I need to do is to talk to the instructors and say, look, the students really feel that, the workload, and we have some data because we have evaluations that can show us that as well about what the students who take the class think about it. And I think you're right that what we should do is see, what can be done about the workload in some of those classes. And so the ones I'm hearing about so far, 111 and 131, is that right?
Okay, can you hear me? Sorry, I wasn't being allowed to unmute, but yes, 111 and 131, also 35L, but I know I took it in the previous format, but I really appreciate that response. I'd also appreciate hearing from any of the professors who instruct these courses if they're willing to answer as well.
Well, I'm at least officially an instructor in charge of all three, so I'm probably the best guy to answer. Yeah, well, my Bruin walk weighting has gone down in terms of difficulty, so I'm starting to learn. I don't know if that matters for anything. It's a problem in the sense that computer science as a field has grown while the curriculum number of hours has not grown, right? And so we have the problem of teaching you the basics and also teaching you the latest and greatest or some approximation to that, and squishing that very large amount of teaching into a very small amount of, just a 10-week period. And that's been a struggle. To some extent, there's no good answer to that. That is, if we cover less, you're going to know less, right? To some extent, it argues for the curriculum sort of revamp that Dr. Korf was mentioning. I think in the end, that's probably going to be the best long-range solution, although we can try to paper over the problems in the meantime.
Any other professors want to chime in? All right. So thank you again for your responses. Our next question is anonymous from the Slido. It's, are there any plans to have smaller class sizes or a way to personally connect with professors?
So in terms of smaller class sizes, in terms of the lectures, we're probably not going to be able to do that. We have a pretty small faculty. We have 40 regular ladder rank faculty. We have about 1,350 undergraduate students, and we simply do not have the resources to have, small lecture sections. To some extent, the model has always been that there's a lecture and then there's a discussion. The discussion sections are much smaller. They're led by teaching assistants. One of the things I did this year, because it was easy to do when I was teaching, is I would drop in on my my TA's discussion sections. I'm not sure how happy they were about that. I tried to be quiet. Mostly I did. One thing I observed is those sections were, a lot of them were not really well attended. So even with a small discussion section, the actual attendance at these things were significantly smaller than the capacity of the enrollment and such. So I think the honest answer here is we are not going to have significantly smaller lecture sections of these classes. And for the smaller classes, that's in some sense what the TA-led discussion sections are for. And that's really, I think, the only way we're going to be able to deal with that issue at this point or anywhere in the near future. The issue, I guess there was another part of that which had to do with connecting with faculty, and all faculty are expected to have at least 2 office hours a week, and people do that. That's an opportunity to go and have sort of individual instruction. The TAs do it as well with either the TA or the faculty member. One of the things I did in the fall when I was teaching was after class, I tended to have my office hours right after class, and lots of students would hang around and we would talk about various things. And I just kind of stuck around as long as anyone was still around to do it. And I certainly would like to encourage more of my colleagues to do that. But I think perhaps the view we can take is that office hours are maybe broaden the notion of that, not just for help with particular things, but an opportunity to go and chat with the professor of the class about related things. I think if there's a lot of people there and people have questions about particular issues with the class, that should probably take priority. But I don't see any reason why students couldn't attend office hours for a broader range of kinds of questions from their faculty members.
Yeah, I teach a class of 270 students this quarter, and I have office hour on Tuesdays. And usually about every week, I would say 5 students show up out of 270. And it's not just about the class materials that I talk about. Sometimes students ask about why I decided to become a computer science major as opposed to a physics major, because I was a physics major in my undergrad. So they ask these kinds of questions. And they also ask me, why did you decide to become a professor? Whenever I have time, I'll be more than happy to talk about them, not just in the class. In the class, I don't have enough time to talk about those things. So I strongly, and I assume many of us actually will be happy to talk about any of these additional materials, not just about the class materials during the office hour. So one thing that I strongly recommend is try to use the office hours to your advantage if you can, because many of us are open-minded about how we have to spend the time during the office hour.
I completely agree with that. And I'd like to invite people, email your professors. In many cases, your professors will take time outside of their core office hours or class to spend time with you if you have problems or questions. And, we're here to help you. So don't feel shy about asking for help or talking about industry or how we got into our field or problems you're having or imposter syndrome. We can help you with that, and we can do it outside of office hours if you reach out to us.
There's another mechanism that I'll mention, which is faculty advising, right? Many of you probably view this as a chore that you have to fulfill every year, but we all do faculty advising, and there's an opportunity to meet with a faculty member. And different people do it different ways. Some people do it in groups. Other people, I do my faculty advising in individual meetings, but there's another opportunity to get to know your faculty advisor and ask more broad kinds of questions, because that doesn't have anything to do with any particular course.
All right, thanks so much for your responses. We have one last question that we have time for in this section, and that will be from Christian.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Christian Aguilar, and my question was, I was just curious, just out of curiosity, is there any cooperation between the department and representatives from the private software industry in development of curriculum? If so, what's the current extent of this?
So I can think of a couple examples of that. One, many you're probably aware of, is that at typically one offering a year of CS 130 is actually taught by a group of Google instructors who are professional software engineers, and they bring their real world experience into the classroom and actually teach that class. We also have a alumni advisory board, and we met just a few weeks ago. We meet annually, and these are people that are, many of them, most of whom are in the software industry, and we toss around ideas about, we use them as feedback on our curriculum and other kinds of things. Another example is there are other lecturers that we hire to teach classes that are in the real world, and they sort of have, and they will, and so I'm thinking of another offering of 130 is often done by a lecturer who's a professional software engineer who comes in and does it. In terms of sitting around, on individual courses with a group of outside people, I don't know that happens so much. It's probably a little bit more informal and indirect in terms of having instructors, and they do things in certain ways, and that sort of gets around, but we don't necessarily have a formal program where we go through individual classes with a panel of outside experts to review the curriculum directly of that class.
Yes, just anecdotally. I mean, I've changed what I teach in my courses based on discussions or emails I have with industry types. So it does happen, but it's under the radar and informal. And, I listen to their advice, and I sometimes follow it just as they sometimes listen to me.
Any other professors want to chime in?
Yeah, it's not just that we are teaching here, we do a lot of research, and for that we are using a lot of software stacks as well ourselves. And our students become software engineers at various companies eventually, and we have a lot of connections with them. So we get a lot of feedback from them, and I constantly update my course materials, my projects, and my course materials depending on what they say. That seems to be important there. So I assume it happens in almost all classes, even though it's not like official channel, or based on what I use, based on what I hear from the students, and based on what I hear from whoever went to the job interviews and complain about something, I try to see whether I need to update some of my material. So I think that is, in general, individual class level, how things are being updated.
All right, well, thank you so much for, oh, sorry, was there anyone?
Yeah, let me just also add in a little bit. At first, CS 133 parallel distributed computing was created in response to the demand from the industry. Remember that in the golden years, 1980s, 1990s, you don't know anything that your program get faster by a factor of 2 every 18 months. But when the dinar scaling stopped, so the world goes to parallel. Now these days, the CPU you have 4 cores, 8 cores, 16 cores. So really a whole bunch of companies coming to us say, you got to have a class to teach students how to program these ones, the parallel machines. And also that's where the cloud computing gets started. You do all these, for example, deep learning training, not on one server, but on tens of thousands of servers. You can manage that. So we create that course, and over the time we also evolve. At the beginning, it was just all multi-core CPUs. Later on, I added GPUs because it's so popular now. And most recently, we also introduced FPGAs. And also used to be 3-4 years ago, it was all on-premise. We run it on Sysnet. There's limitations. I will not go into that, but now we all move into Amazon Cloud, right? So that's another way we kind of respond to the industry trend, industry requirement.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for all of your responses. That wraps up our academic curriculum section. And so next, we're going to finish off with our academic honesty section, and I'll hand it back to Chloe.
Yeah, so we'll plug right along. And for our academic honesty survey, thank you again to everyone who responded. This survey, we got around a little over 70 responses, and I'll just kind of go through them. So the two questions we asked first were, how much do you think your professors have prioritized your learning and understanding of material, which is generally quite strong, and also in terms of how much students respect their CS professors, that's also very strong here. So this is just kind of an overview of the strengths of the department that we've kind of gathered from the survey. And then on to weaknesses, on that in these two areas, the scores were lower, and these were how much you think your professors have respected your time. And I know some students kind of brought that up in our previous discussion in regards to projects and assignments. And then the other question is, how much do you think your professors have considered your mental well-being, which varies on the lower end as well from our survey results. And we also asked the questions, all the responses are anonymous. What is the first course students cheat in? A good chunk of students, I would say almost the majority, 46.9% have not cheated, but the class where most students have admitted to cheating first in is CS35L/97, and then it looks like the next one after that is CS33. And another question we asked is, do students feel emboldened to continue cheating after cheating in one class? And the majority of students said no. So we had 53.2% no, and then there were a slew of other responses, 27.7% said yes, and then the rest were miscellaneous or not applicable. And we also wanted to get a better understanding of why students think that other students cheat, or why they themselves cheat. The top response was that people know that their peers are cheating. Then it goes, students cannot find a proper exam environment while testing virtually. Then we have virtual environments hinder student learning and focus, and course material doesn't prepare students for tested material well. So these are just good things to keep in mind as we move forward with our discussion. And then we always want to recap with what are considered acceptable resources outside of class. UPE offers tutoring. We still are doing it online on Zoom, weekdays 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. There are office hours, piazza, and peer collaboration when allowed. But on that note, we also want to touch on some responses that we got through the surveys that really echo these statements that we've listed, that even though there are available resources, as I've stated on the slide previously, there's still not enough. Students often have conflicts with professor and TA office hours, especially this quarter more than ever due to time zone conflicts and maybe other priorities and conflicts just with everything going on in the world. And some site that even referenced in GitHub code actually helps them learn better. And then also another point that was frequently brought up was because of vague project specs, they can often leave students with no idea where to start. And a lot of students actually reference certain courses where they said having example code and project skeletons help them tremendously and really encourage them to figure out and work through those projects themselves. And year after year, we always come back to this question, but we asked it again, is do students believe that projects should be allowed to be uploaded on GitHub? And 61.9% said yes, so that's a pretty overwhelming majority. Only about 22.2% said no, and then I would say like the rest of the percent is kind of a yes but or a no but kind of qualifying statement, kind of case by case. And also just kind of touch on the GitHub subject again. Since some course syllabi now 8 students may not post projects on GitHub, these are kind of the responses that we got on the survey on why this should be allowed. One is GitHub is an industry standard for job recruitment. Another is removing course content poses limitations on employment prospects. Number 3, GitHub is useful as a means of backing up and keeping track of code progress. And number 4, GitHub is used primarily by students as a reference when stuck instead of a copy paste. And this kind of echoes the previous sentiment that I mentioned, that GitHub actually helps students learn and retain information. And now we'll move on to the discussion portion. So we have some guided questions here to just kick off the conversation. Some students did express interest in the first question is, why do professors believe that students cheat? And so feel free to jump in anytime, unmute yourself. We'd love to hear from all of you.
So I don't know that we're the experts on this, and I'm not sure it matters too much why we think students cheat, unless there's something we can do to sort of rectify it. My experience in my classes has been that I do see some cheating in my classes. I see relatively little. The numbers are, down in kind of, a few percent kind of thing, and that's sort of encouraging to me. I suspect that some students, they feel time pressure, whatever reason, and simply, resort to cheating because they feel that they don't have the time to do it honestly. This is something certainly that I've spent in my entire career a great deal of time thinking and worrying about. And, I'd love to know, how we solve this problem. And, particularly I'd be interested in hearing from students about, suggestions they have. But I often don't know, why students, cheat in a class.
Well, let me tell you why this student cheated in class. I am not a little bit perhaps holier than thou of students that teach in class, because when I was undergraduate, I must admit, I was a good student. I had a clique of good students, and I don't know how to classify this cheating, because we wanted to finish with 100, and we just when I finished an answer and it had a number, a numerical answer, I would talk to my friend with fingers, what the answers that you got. And if we knew, if we got if we got the same answer, we knew that that's it. We did it, we definitely did it right. If not, we will check again. So what was the reason for it? It's not, it's some greediness to get the 100 and not the 90 something. And probably thinking, if I made a mistake, it's probably something, no division by 2 or something. But I must admit that I was tempted and did. So I don't look at, I think it should be done, but I did it.
So I think the one thing that we can do as a faculty, and I always encourage my colleagues to do this and give them examples, is to make it very clear to students what sort of collaboration is allowed and what is not allowed. And what I've always done my entire career is, the first thing students in my class have to turn in is a document which spells out in writing my academic honesty policy. And I ask them to read that and sign it and turn it in, so that everyone is very much aware of, what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. And I think that's sort of an important thing, because I suspect there may be some classes where students are not clear on what is allowed and what is not allowed. And I think it's the faculty's responsibility to make that very clear to the students.
Do any other professors have anything to add?
I had a question from the town hall. Last couple town halls, we talked about the aspect of mental health and pressure and how that can lead to cheating too. And there was discussion about adding a blurb to the syllabi for classes that includes resources, or hey, if you're feeling this way, please reach out with some sort of invitation that acknowledges that. But I don't know what happened after that. So I'm just curious if that went anywhere, or if there is some sort of standard way that everyone gets access to the resources besides just looking it up on the website, through the classes.
It's not standardized across the department. We get a memo from Dean Wessel at the beginning of every quarter encouraging us, to put our syllabus together and post it on CCLA and include, a link to those resources. And some faculty members do, and others probably do not. one thing I'll add on this topic, and it may not be apparent to students, is that, certainly students cheat and get away with it, but it's also the case that students cheat and get caught and suffer consequences. And because of the nature of it, there really isn't a way to sort of publicize that even anonymously. And so students, may kind of assume, and students who do get caught may not talk to their peers about it. But students, students should not assume that because they don't hear about it, it is the case that students almost never get caught, or if they do, nothing is done about it. Most of the faculty take cheating very seriously, and when they do suspect academic dishonesty, there's a very elaborate set of procedures that protect the rights of the students as well, for reporting that to the dean of students, and there's a mechanism for dealing with that. And my experience is that UCLA does actually a pretty good job of that once it gets to the campus level in terms of dealing with these cases.
Can I make a couple comments, even though I'm coming at this from the perspective of mechanical and aerospace engineering? I also attend a lot of training on how to advance my teaching, and the guidance that we get from the UCLA Center for Advancement of Teaching offers a number of things that professors can do, especially during this remote teaching period, but even after, to minimize or at least dissuade students from cheating. So I think one of them, which is very important, was brought up in the chat already, which I think is an excellent point. Faculty have been encouraged not to grade on a curve. I personally feel that a normal curve doesn't make any sense. My personal opinion is that you should have a grading rubric that assigns points based on the understanding of foundational ideas and concepts, and not based on how your classmate is compared to you. So I think not grading on a curve would go a long way. Two other things that could be useful would be requiring students to offer more written expression of their understanding. I implemented this in my undergrad dynamics course so that it's not just a plug and chug with a box numerical answer at the end, but there's actually handwritten statements of the understanding of the concepts that are being demonstrated on exams. And finally, offering opportunities for students to do custom projects. So having students be able to tailor a certain project and infuse their own creativity makes their submissions unique. And these are just some of my experiences from my workshops and my department.
Yeah, I'd like to second that last point. In 97, CS 97, we're doing group projects, which are all unique, right? The students in effect specify their own projects. And, obviously this is gonna lessen the amount of cheating, partly because you're working on stuff you design, and partly because you're doing stuff that's different from everyone else. The downside I've seen in the last year is the remote exams. The cheating is more common on them. At least that's my impression. I don't have any scientific evidence to support that, but I've been in conversations with other faculty, both at UCLA and elsewhere, and it's going up. We're trying hard to sort of tamp it down, but it is an issue, and I'm hoping that come fall, we can sort of do exams in person again.
Thank you so much for all of your responses, and some of what we talked about here kind of leads into our next question. Is a common complaint is that a lot of homework and projects are graded too strictly and harshly, which leads students to rely on cheating. To what extent can we incentivize learning over getting good grades to potentially decrease the likelihood of cheating? And some potential solutions that was floated in our survey was homework graded on completion, releasing sanity checks for projects, and et cetera. And I know there's also been mentioning about removing the implementation of any sort of grading curve in class as well.
So I'll tell you my view on this. I think, COVID has turned this upside down, but our standard model used to be that, the grade would be based on a combination of homework and exams. And what I would typically do is make the homework worth maybe, 30% of the grade, and then make the exams worth most of it. In some sense, what I would like to do is make the grade based almost entirely on the homework, because it's a more realistic setting. Students have more time to work on and such. The reasons I don't typically do that is because I can't be certain that students are doing their own work. I'm fairly confident that in a traditional in-person exam, that there's relatively little cheating going on, or at least I'm being fooled, but to a great deal. And so in that setting, the question is, how much should the homework be worth if you're going to rely on the exam? And one point of view is, well, we'll just grade homework based on whether people tried or completed and such, and make that possibly a fairly low part of the grade, and then rely on exams. And the problem with that, as I see it, is if the homework is not worth very much, and you tell the students you really should do the homework because that's the only way you're going to learn, students have other pressures. They have other classes where maybe the homework is worth more. And my concern with making it worth very little is then they won't do it. And if the students don't do the homework, it's clear they're not going to learn the material. So, what I've tried to do is try to set, some level where, some sort of medium where I think there's enough incentive there for people to actually do it and turn it in and thereby learn the material, but rely on the exams primarily. What I did in the fall because of COVID is I did not have exams at all, because I had no confidence that I could proctor an exam in any reliable way. And so for my class, I did everything based on homework. I also did not curve things because of my concern about cheating, and I didn't want people to feel like they needed to cheat to get a good grade. As a result, homework grades were quite high, as they usually are. People got a lot of good grades, but that's okay. But I think when we go back to in-person instruction, hopefully in the fall, I'm going to rely more on exams and put a heavier weight on it, simply because I have a lot more confidence that students are doing their own work in an exam.
Thank you so much. Is there any, Professor Nelson, you've raised your hand.
It looks like he's muted.
Oh yeah, I wasn't allowed to unmute, but can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I really like the idea of one of the solutions that's mentioned on there, which actually I haven't done in my class yet, but I plan to do it, which is essentially giving, well, I wonder how much this would help. Maybe it would be useful to get feedback on this, but essentially having some public test cases that are run as soon as you submit your homework. Gradescope makes this easy to do, for example. And so it sort of deals with the problem of just some simple small error, like a typo in a name of a function or something that would cause you a lot of points, and maybe takes away the anxiety of the fact that you just like do all this work and then throw it over the fence and hope for the best. So I think there's technology that makes that pretty easy to do. So I mean, I plan to do that in the future, but I just wonder if how much is that part of it or not? I'm curious, like for programming specifically.
For my class, I actually don't use the Gradescope. I tried to use Gradescope last quarter, but it didn't work out very well, mainly because running something on Gradescope actually was not easy. They claimed that they can do it, but I couldn't figure it out very well. So, but what I have been traditionally using in my classes is that I release a shell script that actually packages all the softwares and then make sure that whatever students have written meets all the basic specs like file names and the locations of the files, so that when we actually run and test it, we are almost sure that it will actually run correctly, not the simple mistakes are there. And I also released another kind of a small shell script that runs their software exactly as we run on our grading machine, and then shows some of the basic results that we will look into. And those things, students seem to like it very much. And it actually decreases our grading time a lot, because we make sure that the students actually package their things correctly and they do the basic sanity check. So even though it's quite a bit of time to develop those shells, to make sure that the packaging and the actual testing is done correctly, I think that eventually that saves a lot of my time as well.
I wonder what about the general idea that at the university we are not anymore in AYSO. You know, when my kids were playing soccer, everybody was a winner. Later in life, there is a competition. And I think a university has to prepare the students a little bit, not the rough and tumble outside. There is a competition. So the whole ideas of not care and stuff like this, I don't understand what is the meaning of it. Because there are not everybody is good and not everybody is bad. So I don't understand this aspect. And the second aspect, what about student or anybody? When you feel that the system is not completely fair, or you know, if you are behind, it's not that you are behind. It's because the system is somehow rigged. It favors things which are not really important, or let's say it favors people who are willing to sit at night and do mindless programming, and you don't want to spend your time on the mindless programming because you don't think it's important to your learning and stuff like that. So I think the first thing to do is to feel that students feel that the system, when they get a grade, it really reflects their knowledge and understanding compared to their peers. This is the first thing that has to happen. I think then the dishonesty will be less. Dishonesty in some way comes because you think the system is dishonest, so I will be dishonest too. And there is some competition. You cannot avoid it. All this, let's all of us be good. We will not.
I'm sure the faculty, if we had our choice, would be happy to be relieved of the issue of grading. I mean, I'd love to teach where I don't have to assign grades. I can, I can give homework and I can, give problems and solutions and such and have it entirely focused on learning. But we don't have that option. We're required to give grades. And as a result, we feel like we need to give grades in a way that is a fair reflection of, the knowledge of the students. And it's not because we want to do that, but the system pretty much requires it of us.
Okay, do any other professors have anything to add? Okay, I just do want to mention, as the discussion has been going on, that from our surveys, a lot of people did respond that, there's, I think, a lot of different things going on in people's lives. So people come in with different experiences. So kind of putting them in competition against everyone, I think, kind of serves to everyone's detriment. So just want to have that keep in mind, keeping the survey responses in mind. And we'll move on to our next question of the possibility of an anonymous person was wondering about the possibility of skeleton code for projects in CS35L, CS111, and CS131. They said specs are hard to follow as first-time learners, and also they believe this could reduce GitHubbing.
Well, that's certainly something I'll look into, especially after this meeting. Let me tell you my experience with skeleton code. When I was an undergraduate student, I took a course in which it was a programming languages and business software course in COBOL of all things, in which they gave you skeletons and you filled in the blanks. And I found it incredibly boring. The only thing I remember from that course is I decided once not to use a skeleton I wrote my own code from scratch. I made the IBM the IBM compiler for COBOL crash. That is, the compiler dumped core. And I said, what a loser class this is, right? And so to some extent, maybe it's my reaction to that bad learning experience that's made me avoid having skeletons or fill in the blanks sorts of problems. But you know, it's possible I've gone too far in that respect.
So I'll say that, you know, the faculty, I'll speak for myself and my colleagues, we actually try very hard to make specs as clear and as unambiguous as possible, right? We don't always succeed. And, you know, often, you know, I imagine in some cases, and speaking for myself, you know, I won't give away, you know, there may be a problem, and I try to make the problem as clear as possible, but I don't necessarily give hints about how to do it because I actually want the students to struggle to figure out how to do it. I don't generally want them to figure out what it is they're supposed to do. And one of the instructions that I always give to my students and I give to my TAs is, you know, in discussion section, one of the things I really want them to do is I want them to go over the next homework assignment so that everyone knows what they're supposed to do, not necessarily how to do it, because generally I want them to think about how to do it on their own, but I certainly want them to understand what it is they're supposed to do. And, you know, another thing I will say is that, you know, when you're doing large projects and you're doing brand new projects, which, you know, has the effect of reducing cheating because there aren't other things out there, the downside of that is it's very hard the first time to get the specs right, to get the right level of difficulty, to remove ambiguity and such. And so there's a bit of a tension or trade-off between refining homework sets over time to make them clear and sort of the right level of difficulty. But on the other hand, solutions are out there. And so if you do new things all the time, you know, the quality will simply not be there. It takes time to refine assignments as well.
Thank you for all your responses. Do any professors have anything to add? Do any professors currently implement project skeletons or example code that would like to contribute? If not, we'll move on.
Yeah,
Okay,
actually,
we'll
I
move
want
on to our.
Sorry, I want to add something. Yeah, so yeah, actually, we have been working on something which I think might be interesting. So there are some students, including my own graduate students, we have been working on building some predictive models for COVID to forecast the spread of COVID, the virus. And actually, we put all the code on our project GitHub. And if that might be an interesting resources, I'm happy to point you to the resources so that students can play with the code, because we have a model which is updated on a weekly basis, and you can see how machine learning AI and also statistical learning, this kind of techniques can be used to solve some real world problems, such as this COVID forecast and projection. Yeah, so I can put the link to the GitHub repository on this Zoom chat. And if you are interested, you please do follow up with me, and I'm more than happy to chat more offline. Thank you.
Thank you so much to everyone. We'll move on to our student submitted question. Evan, if you would like to unmute yourself and ask your question, please do now.
Yeah, hi professors. My name is Evan. I'm a second year CS student. Thanks for taking the time to have this discussion with us. My question is about feedback, specifically whether professors would be willing to incorporate more feedback when they're actually assigning projects during the quarter, such as, you know, receiving a number of hours taken by students or overall feelings of support. At the very least, this could, you know, provide the professors teaching classes with signal about the true difficulty of their projects, and at least shed some light into a student schedule, keeping in mind that students take 4 of these classes per quarter. And I can only speak about my personal experience, but I also have to balance club responsibilities, athletics, and just taking time for mental health as well.
I think it's a great idea. I mean, I could imagine I'm trying to imagine how this might work. With every submission, the student also submits what they think of the assignment. You know, was it too easy, too hard, clear, unclear? We get a little bit of that, but only in a summary form when we get the evaluations at the end of the quarter. But that sounds like a very interesting idea. I guess I'm wondering if we would need to do it in a way that the student can comment on it anonymously. I mean, certainly, you know, the faculty and TAs aren't going to use this as part of their grading, but maybe the students might feel that in order to give honest feedback, they need to sort of do it in an anonymous way. But I think it's a very interesting idea, sort of get it sort of assignment by assignment.
I did something along the line this quarter because I haven't taught CS 143 for several years. And this year I wanted to change the project quite a bit. So what I did was I used a Google form. And the reason why I actually did it was because up to project, I originally planned to give out 6 projects this quarter. But when I released the project number 3, some students came to my office hour and then I started asking, so how many more projects do you plan to release? And how many hours am I supposed to work on this? So actually I somehow felt that, oh, this student must be feeling that I'm giving too many projects. So I got similar signals on Piazza as well. So what I did was I created a Google form to ask students to write down how many hours of the project, how many hours they spend on each of the project up to 3. And then whether they want to have 6 projects or fewer projects or more projects. And from that, I realized that students are spending way much more time than I expected. So what I decided eventually to do was cut out the last project that I was planning and then somehow make the later project a little bit easier than I originally expected. And I don't know eventually how people will think about those. But another side that I also want to mention is that this is pretty much, once I start using the same project or similar projects for a number of years, I have very good ideas about how many hours students will use. So at that point, I'm not sure whether keep kind of getting student feedback might be that beneficial for me in terms of making sure that it's in reasonable workload. But at least when this was actually the first time that I tried to get the immediate feedback on the project, but this time it was very helpful for me.
Thank you so much. If no one else has anything to add, we'll go to Jim to ask a question and actually kind of serves as a follow-up to the one Evan just asked.
Hi, everyone.
So Jim, if you want to, yeah.
Yeah, so my question is, would the department be willing to incorporate more feedback regarding units not accurately reflecting the workload of some classes?
Certainly. I think as a general rule, we would be happy to have any sort of constructive feedback. And if there's a way of sort of collecting that in a good way, I mean, the standard evaluations do have a measure, which is workload. Workload was too high, workload was too low, right? And, we certainly, look at those things, and certainly the individual instructors do. But I think the department in general would be open to any sort of constructive feedback we can get from our students. And that's certainly an important issue.
Would any other professors or department members like to add to this question?
I mean, I would just second that feedback from you is really important. I mean, we need to know what you care about. I mean, there are a lot, even just tonight, there are a lot of issues talked about, but we really value what you think, and we want to help make this a better program for you. So we really need your input, to the extent that you're willing to give it, and that's really going to help us kind of try to make some of these things more concrete in terms of how we can make changes that help you. So yeah.
Okay, thank you so much to all of your responses. We'll move on to an anonymous question that was submitted. Can professors offer project redos if students get lower than a certain score? They believe this could decrease cheating.
So the difficulty I would have with that is that I think it's important after, the students have worked on a project or an assignment and submitted their work, that they see a solution to how to do it. And so I always, publish a solution to the assignments because I think it's valuable. Now, I don't know how many students actually look at it. A lot of students don't want to have to think about it at all, but I feel that part of my obligation is, after giving them an assignment, having them work on it, say, okay, here's how I think it should be done. Here's what I think a good answer would look like. The concern is then if there's a project redo and I've given out the solution to it, I don't know how I, disincentivize people from looking at the solution. And I would have concerns if I've, given out the solution, made it widely available to the class, that anyone who wants to do it again, I would have concerns about cheating in that context.
Are there any other additional thoughts?
One thing that so for my projects, I'm very strict about the grading. There is really no regrading, essentially. And then if the students somehow make minor mistakes because they didn't run the test script and they got 0 scores or 0.5, I don't know, very low score for each of the projects, I don't regrade them. I don't give any more extra credit. And I think this is something that every CS student has to know. The nature of our job is such that we really have to pay attention to the detail, right? So think about Microsoft, right? You're working for a Microsoft, you're implementing the new version of the Windows or update of the Windows. And this happens all the time. If you make a very minor mistake, if you're supposed to write down, let's say, greater than, and somehow I made a mistake and write down smaller than as opposed to greater than, everything will go just completely amok. And then that is a very minor mistake. And then somehow that percolates and then eventually that is released and everyone's computer starts to crash, right? That's a very minor mistake. We may complain that we put in all the efforts to create this beautiful program, but just because of the one simple typo, now I'm creating this problem and we are blamed for it. Well, that's very unfortunate. I completely empathize with the person feeling that this is such a mistake and I'm getting a lot of blame for it. But that is the nature of our job. We really have to pay attention to the detail, and every single mistake really counts and create enormous damage to people's lives. So in some sense, I think going through that exercise at school and then somehow really get hammered with this idea that these details are important. And when you are given test cases, you really have to make sure that our code pass those test cases. I think that is very important. And in some sense, we don't really learn it unless we feel the pain. And I think even though I know that it's a lot of pain to the students, I think it's actually worthwhile, really.
I would take the opposite stand of John Cho. I don't view my mission as preparing students to work for Microsoft or to code for Microsoft. My job is, I think, in terms of teaching, is to prepare students to think and understand principles. And then taking care of details, learning this language or that language, this will come with the job. I'm not teaching something that you need, so there is aspect of programming. And as I say, that there was an aspect of programming, so my student learning assistant took care of it. Personally, I don't see that why somebody who made a slight mistake should I don't know, this is not, there is a difference between UCLA and Santa Monica College. Santa Monica College prepares students to work at Microsoft, perhaps. We, you know, not everybody go to graduate school, but a top university like ours, the aim should be that our mission is for all students to be at a level to continue to graduate school. And it's not the details that will lead them to graduate school.
Thank you so much for your responses, and for the sake of time, we'll move on to our very last question, which is anonymous. Do you think a centralized curving might be an alternative if removing curving altogether isn't an option?
I'm not sure I understand what's meant by centralized curving here.
I'm not too sure what the anonymous question asker intended.
Let me try to perhaps explain. I think that the student means that some student say, you know, I believe that the top 20% of the class should get A. And perhaps some professors think 30, and some professors think 10. So this means, or she means, should be standardized. You know, the way that you say what fraction get this is the curving. What fraction get what should be standardized.
Okay, now I understand, and now I can respond. In some sense, even if the department wanted to do that, we really wouldn't have the ability. The university gives very wide latitude to individual faculty to assign grades in the way that they see fit. I think, you know, we could probably, if we wanted to, we could encourage people to do that. I think most people have a sense of, I mean, what I do when I make a curve, and I generally do use a curve, absent, you know, these times, is I have a sense that the average GPA at UCLA is 3.0. And so I assume that's probably going to be about the middle of the curve. And then I try to, you know, base my grades off of that. But the department, particularly the leadership really as a whole, doesn't really have the ability to tell faculty members, or certainly not to enforce that, okay, you need to do your curves this way, you need to do your curves that way. Individual faculty have leeway to sort of grade their courses as they see fit. I mean, I could imagine a faculty discussion where we might say, this is what we should strive for, but there is not a way really to sort of enforce that among the faculty as a whole.
One of the reasons why creating a grading rubric that is based on concepts and understanding of concepts would get rid of some of these issues, so that it's not a subjective choice by any individual professor, because they feel like 5%, 10%, 15% should get the A. That's my opinion.
Do any other professors or department members have anything to add about the subject of curving when it comes to standardized or central curving? If not, thank you, everyone. I'll welcome Rucha back into.
All right, next slide. Yeah, we honestly just wanted to say a huge thank you again to all the faculty that showed up, all the students that showed up. Collecting feedback and insights from both ends is so valuable, not just to talk about it, but to actually make changes and make our community even better. And so again, we will be following up with faculty with notes from the meeting, and again, particularly looking at actionables that can be taken to further our community and make everything better. So again, thank you so much to everyone who has come out.
I'd like to say on behalf of the department, thank you to everyone who came and participated in this, and particularly to the leadership of ACM and UPE for organizing and putting this event on. It's very helpful to us, and I really want to thank you all for your insightful questions and for all the organization that went into this. It was really a treat. Thank you very much.
And every year we do take a group photo. I think this year is going to be a little different. So if anyone who wants to stick around, turn your videos on and be in this picture, that would be great. And we'll figure out how to do this. There's a lot of us. Let me stop the recording as well.